Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining us again for another one of these webinars. Today we've got Jim Rounds with Jim Rounds Consulting. He's been a long-time economist in Arizona, a long-time friend. So Jim's going to give us a glimpse into what the economy's been doing and what the COVID situation has done to us and what recovery may look like. And then we also have Alec Thompson, and Alec is with the governor's office, who has been instrumental in administering the census, the 2020 census. So we're coming towards the end of the time for the census count, and I thought it would be very timely to have Alec on to talk about where we're at with our census tracking efforts and what needs to be done. So Alec, turn it over to you. Thanks for joining us today. How are we doing on our census count?
Yeah, thanks, Keith. Yeah, so we are 8 days out from the completion of the 2020 census count, pending any changes by the courts. That they're actually reviewing a case today that could potentially extend the census through the end of October. But as of today, we are 8 days out from the conclusion of the 2020 census count. And Arizona is doing actually pretty well. We've made a lot of headway in the last few weeks. Governor Ducey established the Arizona Complete Count Committee last year to really lead the state's efforts in terms of both a community outreach grassroots campaign as well as a paid media effort. And so we've been, getting the message out to Arizonans statewide for almost a year now to really drive response, build awareness about how critically important this is for the next 10 years in our state, both in relation to funding that comes into the state from the federal government, distribution of state shared revenues to local communities, and also the allocation of the representation at the federal level. So our seats in Congress, we are actually up. It's widely speculated that we could gain a 10th congressional seat after this census. So, I think this is just critically important, and we've been trying to communicate that with every Arizonan, as well as the fact that it's safe and all information is protected when you respond. But as of today, Arizona stands at a 92.8% of all households enumerated. So that number consists of both households that self-responded as well as those that have been enumerated in person. So, we still have about 8% to go, give or take, but that makes a big difference, right? So we're still calling on everyone to help us get the word out. Very conservative estimates say that with just a 1% undercount, we stand to lose about $620 million over the next decade. So this is big money. Even also on the conservative estimates, it's about $3,000 per person that we stand to lose or gain every year. So, we're talking about a lot of money. We're talking about really making sure that our communities are represented well and based on the people that live there, both in terms of population as well as demographics of that population. And so we're working hard to get the word out. Some positive news, I think a lot of the headlines tend to focus on how behind we are, which we are behind, but they assure us that we will get to that complete count by the end of the month. But we did lead the nation in terms of self-response in the initial weeks. Also, we have officially surpassed the 2000 and the 2010 self-response rates. So, some really good news. We have a few counties specifically that are lagging behind, and I know this audience may have some ability to drive response in some of our more rural counties. Apache County, for example, La Paz County, Greeley County, a few others are really behind in their numbers, and we want to make sure that they can step up and help us get the word out, because I think the state is really well positioned, and Governor Ducey's been very supportive of this effort, but we also want to make sure that people across the state are hearing it from local trusted voices, whether that be a county supervisor or a business leader or a faith leader. So we want to make sure that, everyone's talking about it, it's top of mind. And so we're encouraging everyone to get the word out.
Well, that's really encouraging, Alec. I constantly hear from rural communities about them wanting their fair share. And I think the census is a basis for a lot of what, quote, the rural community's fair share is. And so it just makes it all that much more important. For the pending court decision, is that based on or as a result of the COVID situation?
I'm sorry, what was that?
For the pending court decision, what was the impetus to extend it? Is it the COVID situation?
The lawsuit was led by a group of local communities and mostly tribal communities. So Navajo Nation as well as Gila River Indian community are both part of that lawsuit. So, there's no doubt that the COVID pandemic absolutely had an impact on these operations statewide, but the most impacted by far were our rural communities as well as our tribal communities. And so we've been able to gain some ground in the rural communities, but the tribal communities are still behind. So
it's equally as important for them as it is the rural communities. So that'll be interesting to see what the outcome is. Well, Alec, I appreciate it. Where can people go to find more information or drive folks?
Yeah, so when I wrap up, I'll drop a few links in the chat, but a few top level ones I want to just throw out there are my2020census.gov. That's where you can get it done. I'll also share with you, Keith, that maybe you can send it out to this group after. There's a full toolkit of resources that you can drop into social media, newsletters, etc. To help us get the word out in the final days. And then I'll also drop in the response rate so you can look at both how your community is doing in terms of non-response follow-up efforts, but also what your community's local self-response rate is. So definitely please help us get the word out. The message is respond now and remind someone else. So, we're just trying to get it done. 8 days.
Great, we got an 8-day push. So, well, send that stuff over and we'll get it out to everybody on the call here. So thanks, Alex, for
awesome.
your
Thank
time
you,
and sharing your thoughts. Jim Rounds Consulting. What's going on with our economy? What's happened to us here over the last 9-12 months?
Oh, so much, but we can get through it pretty quickly.
Sure.
So for everybody, put together a PowerPoint and split it up into 3 sections. We can stop for Q&A, chat with Keith a little bit on each one to break it up. But let me just get right into it. All good on that, Keith?
Yep.
All right. So let's go through the main items. You don't have to look at 1,000 economic data points to try to figure out what's going on in the economy. Let's cover US first. As you know, real GDP fell by a significant amount. That wasn't shocking. Based on the entire economy closing, people were expecting 30 to 40% decline anyway, so it fit right in the middle. But here's why we didn't feel it as much across the nation. Because of the stimulus package, we had massive increases in personal income, and that buoyed the economy, retail sales, other activity more than it normally would have. So what we have to do is be a little bit careful that we haven't necessarily felt the worst parts of this downturn yet. We're growing jobs, and I'll cover that in a few minutes, but the artificial stimulus boost that's going to be going away to a large extent could dampen activity a little bit going forward for the rest of this year. Leading indicators is moving up. Something to keep in mind, underemployment and unemployment. And there was a lot of discussion about that this last week. If you're looking for a job, you're considered unemployed. If you're not looking for a job, you're not considered unemployed. But if you're not looking for a job because you're just beaten down by everything that's going on, you're picked up in the underemployment data. So right now, I don't even look at the unemployment numbers hardly at all. I focus on the underemployment. There's a little bit of a lag, but just something to keep in mind. Take it with a grain of salt when you see the unemployment numbers. It's better to look at job figures. That's even better than gross state product figures when you look at economic health. Job losses by sector across the country, leisure and hospitality, very weak. Same things that you would have expected here. And in terms of the shape of the recovery, this has kind of become a little inside joke with economists because everybody has a different idea. The Nike swoosh recovery is a little bit more like what happened after 2008, where we fell fast and it took 100 months to recover the lost jobs. The W-shaped recession means you fall far, you jump back up, you fall again, and then you jump back up. That would only be the case if we had to shut the entire economy down. The V-shaped recession is what we had after 2001, where you fall quickly and you recover the jobs that are lost. And then a U-shaped recession is it drags on a little bit longer. And in my opinion, this is what it's going to look like. It's going to have a hitch in it. And I want to sear this into your minds on what the recovery looks like, because I believe that this is going to be what happens, and it'll help with your planning. And with the aid of Charles Barkley, we're going to call this the Barkley-Hitch Recession. Just give it a second. Yeah. All right. So forever, it's the Charles Barkley-Hitch Recession. You'll never lose that image in your mind. You'll feel better if you're a golfer, no matter what your handicap was before after seeing that. But overall, the U.S. economy is trailing Arizona some, but we're going to be recovering much more quickly than we did after the last downturn.
And so, Jim, why the hitch recovery? What's going to cause that, or what's the reason for
that? So when we fell far, hang on just a second. So when we fell far, it was because we shut the economy down. We lost a lot of jobs. I'll show you the numbers, but we lost basically 300,000 jobs in Arizona, and we've recovered about 60% of those back. That's just because the economy mostly open. Well, we're not going to go from being completely closed to fully open. So this last half is going to take a little bit longer to recapture. So we're going to see job recovery in Arizona more towards the end of next year in terms of recovering the lost jobs. And across the U.S., it'll take a little bit longer.
Makes sense. Makes sense. The first two slides you showed, real GDP, severe negative, but then this next slide, personal income, real high. The personal income, you explained, is held up by the stimulus package. That would say to me there's a real gap between how do we pay for that, because we've had GDP now in the negative. Am I thinking right?
Yes, and it's going to be a real problem. We seem to have given up as a country on trying to match revenues with expenditures. I'm not talking about advocating for more tax cuts or more spending. I'm advocating for having a balance between the two. That's how you properly run your household budget, your business budget, and that's how the government's supposed to run its budget as well. It's going to be so lopsided. I was talking with my son recently, who's interested in economics finally, and I had to apologize to him again for all the extra debt that he's going to have to cover for what we're spending right now down the road. But I think it's a can that we can kick down the road a little while longer. But yeah, we're not going to see the same level of stimulus coming forward.
Any questions from the audience at this stage for Jim? Okay, well, let's keep rolling, Jim.
All right. So let's get into Arizona. Keep in mind, and we remind people of this, fourth grade math every time you're in a downturn. If you fall by 50% in a category, you have to grow by 100% to get back to where you were before. And how I had to make this slide years ago to explain to some lawmakers this math, and it worked, so I kept it. If you have $1 and you lose half of it, you're down to 50 cents. You have to double your 50 cents or increase it by 100% to get your dollar back. So when you fall far, you have a lot of job losses and percentages, you're going to have really significant growth in terms of percentages. And so the percentages can lie. So you have to take a look at levels, and you have to take a look at the rates of growth, because this really applies to this downturn. And historically, after the last downturn, after the Great Recession, I think people forgot a little bit about our history. People were thinking that we're more volatile than the US as a whole. And while that's true, we always do better than the US by a significant amount during an expansion. And during a downturn, we still outperform the US. It was just upside down after the 2008 recession, 2009. But overall, we're still doing better than the US. You have to put all the statistics in relative terms. You have to compare incomes to the US average. You have to take a look at increments versus overall levels. It's just a little bit more complicated to look at the data. You have to use different points at different points in time. And for some context, job growth year to date through June, Arizona was number 2 behind Utah, number 3 in July. Idaho doesn't count. 3 again in August. Idaho doesn't count. We're doing well in relative terms. Now there's a negative number in front of that, but overall we're doing well compared to the US. This is what I thought was the most interesting of the material that we put together. So in the Great Recession, we lost 300,000 jobs. COVID recession, 300,000 jobs. But it took 101 months to recover the jobs after the Great Recession. Right now, we're 170,000 of the 300,000 lost jobs back. And we're looking at the end of next year for our forecast for full job recovery in Arizona. And so I drew this up just this morning because I was told that chart's kind of hard to follow. All this is showing that black curve line that says jobs is just the employment growth that we would have had absent a recession. The kind of rose color downturn, that area under the curve that's filled in, are the job years lost that we're projecting for this downturn. The 2008 recession, same job losses just about, but it took far longer to recover the lost jobs. And it's the lost job years that really indicates the recession pain. And so we're having a hard time explaining that we can lose just as many jobs as during the Great Recession, but if you recover them more quickly, the Barkley-Hitch, up quickly and then maybe take another year and a half, we'll get those back. So again, this is better than most other states. Job losses by sector, leisure and hospitality, still brutalized. I'm still very worried. We've been very strong advocates of the government spending at least another $10 million a year on tourism marketing with some emphasis on rural Arizona over the next 10 years minimum. I don't know if we're going to be able to use CARES Act funding or what it'll be, but if we don't do the additional advertising, this is one of the few times where I think we're going to have a significant lost opportunity for a massive return on investment from this spending, because these other states are already thinking about spending more on tourism marketing to try to recapture some of that pent-up demand. We're going to be losing some of our visitors that we would have had. Instead of coming back after the downturn, they're going to be going to Colorado or some other places if we don't step it up. So huge advocate for something really big on the tourism side, and it's so significant for rural Arizona that has to be, rural Arizona has to have a seat at the table on this. Maybe we end up going above the 10 million, I don't know. So in terms of the employment projections, you can see on the right side of the chart what happened. The Barkley-Hitch started. It's going to take a little while to get that recovery, but we're looking at the end of next year for our earliest point. Our friend George Hammond at U of A had a forecast where he's expecting the front end of his range a little bit earlier, but we're seeing more and more of us economics nerds being on the same page that this is going to come back more quickly than one of these really overly dramatic downturns. Also like to look at unemployment insurance initial claims. You could see that huge spike. It's almost returned to normal levels. And this is because we're adding jobs again. Now, there's a lot of people that stopped looking. They've given up. And you saw that with the employment discussion this last week. But now's a good time for them to start looking for additional employment opportunities because we are growing each month. Any questions about the state as a whole before I get into the regions?
Can you see the Q&A in the chat, Jim?
No, it's blacked out on mine.
Okay. Julie from Yuma asks, if you remove the metros, would we still have the same results as a state?
Absolutely not. Rural Arizona isn't just suffering now. Rural Arizona never really got back on its feet after the Great Recession. The strength of the urban areas really lifted the state to be top 5 in most categories, and I'm very much worried about rural Arizona. And so it hasn't been the most politically correct thing to say about such a significant increase in tourism marketing spending, but it's the right thing to do. We did an analysis for the industry, and we had, if we can get just a small portion of what we're losing, 10% back of what we lost, what we're projecting to lose in tourism activity, if we can get 10% of it back, that's $100 million in state revenues. We can put a little bit towards that and get 10% back pretty easily. But again, it's got to be rural and it's got to be urban. And going forward, maybe we need a new strategy about in-state tourism activity. I did love the fact that our friend Debbie at AOT has already been working on some in-state travel activities, because penny saved is a penny earned. Also, if we can have like in October, I'm going up to Flagstaff. We were going to go to Oceanside. Happy to go to Flagstaff and just relax a little bit with a can of beer on the porch of a little cabin. But same thing I would have probably done in Oceanside, but I'm spending my money in the state. So I like that AOT's already all over that.
Yeah, that's a great point. And tourism has such a profound impact on many of our rural communities. It's really important. Jessica Bryson has a question for you. Do you anticipate the November elections having a lasting effect, either positive or negative, on the recovery? Or do you see that more as a short-sighted impact that the media is pushing?
Well, we did the economic analysis. We didn't get paid for it. We volunteered our time to do the economic analysis of Prop 208, the education one. And I'm a no on that because of the economic consequences, but I'm actually a supporter of additional education funding. My best guess, after all I've looked at the last 3 or 4 years, is that we might need another $500 million or $1 billion in K-12. The initiative, though, isn't going to bring in $1 billion. It's going to bring in about $650 million. That's a big difference. We're not going to see much of a classroom size reduction or extra spending on teacher pay. So I'm a no, but I just think that there's something better. However, we had a chance to respond after 2018 and put something together. Helios worked very hard with some of the other economic development organizations, and it just never took off. And so I understand their frustration that they feel like something needs to be done. I think something needs to be done. I just think that there's a better plan, and that could hurt some small business recovery. And that's why if we have a recovery package, we have to have a strong emphasis on small businesses that went under, those entrepreneurs getting back on their feet. Maybe we need some kind of a state-sponsored loan program where they guarantee a portion of the loans for the businesses starting up again. I don't know what it would be, but that's why we have to start jotting these things down and getting good people at the table and chatting about what would be the right thing to do and put together a package to hand the legislature and the governor. Even if the legislature is split, the House Dems and Senate Republicans, if we base this on facts and economics, it's not going to be political. And I think we'll have a chance.
How about the national election? What do you see the presidential election as doing for our economy?
Well, I won't get into personal preferences, but one issue that could happen that people need to be aware of is if Biden comes in, and I actually like Biden, if Biden comes in, but he's forced to push a lot of the heavy regulation items, the Green New Deal issues, the things that aren't very cost effective, we'll see a pullback in the stock market. It'll drop pretty significantly. I already have my my notice to my financial advisor on what to do if it's looking like that's going to happen. We already have a threshold on what we're looking for a fall. But Trump hasn't done the most wonderful job in terms of some of these economic issues either. He was a beneficiary of an economy that was growing. So I really don't think either of them are qualified to be president, but that's the best that we got. And I don't want to say who I'm going to vote for. Half my friends will hate me.
Bernie's already out, Jim. I'm sorry to break the news to you.
Oh, don't say that.
Okay, let's keep going.
All right. The last piece, Greater Phoenix, and this will get back to Julie's comment. So Great Recession, lost 240,000 jobs. COVID lost half, or not, we lost less. But again, it's the same story. We're going to be recovering pretty quickly. So 118,000 out of 218,000 jobs have already been recovered. Greater Phoenix losses by sector, leisure and hospitality, again, hit hard. Housing permits are still moving up. We probably need to be developing more, but part of this is adjusting for the fact that we had shortages before COVID hit. It's not just purely based on out-of-state investors, although that's part of it. This is what I'm worried about. I'm worried about housing affordability. In fact, I am actually noting housing affordability to add to the recovery package in some way. I just did. So something to keep an eye on.
It's a very profound issue for rural Arizona.
Oh, indeed.
Affordable housing.
Indeed. Job losses in Tucson, leisure and hospitality. Balance of state, leisure and hospitality. Arizona employment by county. Coconino, I'm worried about. Pinal, there were a lot of job losses from Pinal workers that lost their job outside of Pinal. They've actually been working very hard on trying to locate more of its workforce into the area. And we did an economic development leakage analysis. You've heard of retail leakage analysis. Pinal was pretty sharp, and they wanted to do an economic development leakage analysis to show what kind of benefits there would be with these small changes in bringing businesses, the indirect and induced businesses, and those jobs back to Pinal. And then that helps you identify how much you want to spend on programs related to it. So it's a great way to do break-even analyses. But one of my favorite places in Coconino, I'm worried about the overall job losses, and we have some minimum wage increases that are still going to be rolling in. So we'll have to see what happens there.
Jim, back to that slide. Is this all primarily related to the hospitality and leisure industry?
For rural Arizona, it's dominated by it. I mean, it's a big part of all of them. Mm-hmm. But it's disproportionate to rural, and sure. And I'd like to see the rural parts of the state diversify their economy more. No doubt. But shorter term, you strengthen what you're good at. Longer term, you expand into tangential areas, and then you expand into wholly new areas. And so we'll have to see. We had a good experience working with NACOG on basically their strategic plan. They ended up winning an award for it, which was great. They thought the federal reviewers must have thought it was innovative. And so I feel like we're doing really good work in Arizona on economic development. We're not the same state that we were 10 years ago, where I had us ranked 50th out of 50 states after the Great Recession, because we had no programs. We had one program that I had listed in the report, and it was a jobs related program, job training. And before I finalized the report, all the monies were swept. And so I had to eliminate it. We had nothing. Now we're very robust in terms of economic development, but now it's time to fine tune. And here are the numbers for leisure and hospitality by county. It's just massive.
Wow. Yeah, that's a telling slide.
Right. So overall, we're still very bullish on Arizona. I feel like if we do the right things on trying to accelerate out of this downturn, and we're already in the top 5, but if we do the right things, we very well could have the best next decade that we've ever had. We're moving into higher wage industries. We're moving into a lot of great areas and improving the quality. If you take a look at our per capita personal income stats for the state and even for the major metro areas and compare it to our economic development competitors, even after making proper adjustments, we're still lagging. But we're on the cusp of moving up to that tier 1 in terms of high tech and others. But we have to balance that and be excited about those and remember the whole of Arizona. We have to remember the rural parts. We have to remember the rural parts that maybe can take advantage of some of the tech and higher wage development. I would love all those suppliers to be Arizona based. That's what increases multipliers when you do that economic modeling and you have a bigger fiscal impact. So public policy matters. That's a big thing. The bottom line though is we need a legit Jobs 2.0 package. I only say that because we called it the Jobs package 10 years ago, but in reality, I think we have to deal with unemployment insurance issues, the tourism, small business loans. It's poverty in K-12 that impacts the entire state's financial future, including universities. We have so many things. I think I got to change that Jobs 2.0 package to economic fundamentals package or something like that. We have to get back to the basics and not think about politics. So the more support that we can get from rural Arizona on that as we start to develop a coalition, and we just started this ourselves, but now that we've been talking about it, doing interviews, I feel like there's a little bit of support building up. So we'll probably get some sponsors later, put together the right team, and work with both sides of the aisle during the next legislative session if we can. And that's it in terms of the PowerPoint.
Great. Well, if anybody's got questions, please chime in on the Q&A or the chat. I think there's no doubt that rural Arizona is in need of a lot of help. Housing is a very significant one. The broadband issue is just pervasive throughout all aspects of the economic spectrum, and the lack of the connectivity in rural Arizona is really a hindering issue. So we're going to continue to work hard on that. We at the ACA are embarking on a very robust reshoring effort from manufacturers that have operations overseas. So we're gonna really drive hard on that. What are some other sectors that you see that we ought to look towards that may be emerging?
Well,
at least for Arizona.
Yeah, with technology changing, the nice thing is that it's the same quality workforce that you need, but it's different subsectors within, say, high tech. And the Commerce Authority, you've always done a fantastic job on this. GPEC, UMA, you can go across the state, and we have some of the best people in economic development in the country. It's just making sure that they're supported. And one thing that we might be working on is, well, we'll be publishing a paper having to do with high-tech workforce development to give a teaser on what we can do, what we need to do to catch up to our competitors. And so I mentioned earlier that per capita personal income, whether you look at state or even Greater Phoenix. When we looked at Greater Phoenix and we compared it to Denver, Salt Lake, and 10 others, we were lagging all but Albuquerque. And that's not good. But we used to be at about 100%. Now the state's fallen to about 85%, maybe a little bit lower of the US average. With the right policies, we can improve that. And what we're going to do is show what happens if we improve our per capita personal income to catch up with the US average? What does that mean in terms of overall economic and fiscal benefits? And then we have to figure out how long it's going to take so it's an honest assessment. And that extra benefit analysis discounted will tell us how much we can spend on the projects to break even. In other words, we're always being told by policymakers we need to operate government more like a business. Businesses spend money when they're going to have a positive return on investment. So we need to really bring in that argument. We helped NAU, U of A, and ASU last year with their new economy requests by doing the very same thing. What does it take for the break even to happen? Much like what we do for the business recruitment. It's just a little bit longer term because it's more foundational.
Sure. Interesting. Medical marijuana, or not medical, recreational marijuana is going to be on the ballot this year. What do you think the impacts of that might be economically?
I know with great certainty, because we're the only ones that produced a legitimate forecast. So we produced the forecast a year ago and just updated it for the campaign because there were no other good studies out there. You can't just look at average consumption per person. You have to look at, like with California, the reason that they over projected revenues is because the individual cities weren't implementing the law and allowing the dispensaries to open. And so you have to make adjustments to it. But we have, by year 4, about $400 million in tax collections. A pretty decent amount of that is going to go towards community colleges. What I would like to see is an opportunity, and maybe in the same economic development package, what if we further the purpose of the initiative if it passes, and we have some of the money slide down into connectivity with K-12, some of it slide up into connectivity with universities, and we use a lot of this to help reinvigorate some of the activities in rural Arizona. So people have a different opinion on, whether or not it's the right thing to do. But in terms of the math, if it passes, we'll have a lot of opportunities. And I'm excited when there's possibilities of having money to pay for projects that we want, because we all know how often we brought up projects that we'd like to see happen and there's no funding for it. Criminal justice reform might be an opportunity for additional funding too. There's so many good ideas out there right now. This is the most optimistic I've been since Kirk Adams called me back when I left my business card on his desk after the Great Recession and said, you guys need to do something. And I just gave a presentation with some lawmakers in the back of the room and I just ripped them. And I felt a little bad. He called us right back and said, work with my team. Let's put together, a package and a bill. The bill didn't pass, but most of the provisions went in the next year. That was part of the ACA bill that created you all. So I think we can do it again, but I think we have to get past the political dogma and do what's right for the state.
Yeah, makes sense. Julie from Yuma says there's a great deal of angst in rural Arizona. Keith mentioned broadband and you mentioned education. Tourism is not what all of rural is known for. We need to diversify rural, get higher education engaged outside of the metros. What can we do to address these other issues?
That's a tough one. We definitely need, it's not the same story for everybody. And what I learned from spending a couple of years with AAED and traveling all over the state and talking and giving economic presentations was every community is struggling in the same way. The same 10 items keep coming up, but the order is so different everywhere. Mm-hmm. And so Julie's exactly right. We have to try to figure out a way of enhancing opportunities based on strengths of the different communities. I'm bullish and I want to have a healthcare provision in this package we're talking about. We worked with the Healthcare Alliance, rural and urban folks, and helped get the federal reimbursement monies, which is going to bring in an extra $1 billion a year. We worked against the initiative that was going to cost the hospitals $1 billion a year, and that got tossed because of signature count, but it wasn't a minimum wage bill. It would have been knocked off anyways. But if we can expand in some cases, shore up the hospital base in a lot of these communities. I want to see additional recruitment of retirees, because more and more retirees, as you're hearing about, don't want to fully retire. I want that doctor maybe retiring from Chicago, coming and living in a great place in rural Arizona, and working 2 days a week at the clinic with some connections with a university and a community college, and help strengthen that up. And so I don't think that there's one big issue that's going to help on everything. I think it's going to be, we have to do this with a lot of different tools. We have to have a full toolbox. It can't just be a toolbox with a hammer and a screwdriver in it. And we might have to look at things like, how are we going to fund transportation? One assignment we're working on with the League and MAG has to do with whether or not, what are the different tools that can be used to help with infrastructure investment, and whether or not, and TIF is included on the list that we have to look at. So again, it's getting back to lots of opportunities if we have leaders. What frustrates me as a small business owner is we kind of operate as a quasi little chamber ourselves. We volunteer a lot, we chat with people and, try to come up with ideas for these packages. But 20 years ago when I was at the Capitol, I used to see people more feisty, and they'd be banging their fists on the podium, which I just thought was the most boss thing to do as you're making a good argument. It just was so cool. And the temperament has softened a bit. I want people to get a little bit more pissed off this coming year. I mean, you can disagree without being disagreeable, but you can disagree more aggressively than we've done in the past and try to get, change to happen. So that's why I think we need a lot of people to really stand up.
Very good. Victor and Sarita asked, what if any efforts can be done to further provide dollars to rural businesses and organizations from the EDA CARES Act?
That'll be difficult because it's going to depend on what happens, like we were talking about earlier, what happens with the elections going forward. If we're going to have continued problems with COVID and we don't get past, the bulk of the problems. This is the area I struggle with the most. And I've been studying Arizona economics for about 25 years now. And I was born here. I've traveled to every part of the state. I understand it well. And the projects that we can design that'll have a high return on investment for rural Arizona, I struggle with that one a bit more because the economy varies so much everywhere. But I would love to have an opportunity to be chatting with the experts in rural Arizona and getting their ideas. And if anybody has some clever ideas, I've talked to Julie before and a handful of others, but shoot me an email saying, hey, can we get on the phone? I'm always up for a call. Or if you just want to shoot me an email with, hey, read this article, it might work. My email is really easy. It's my last name, rounds@roundsconsulting.com. And anything you have that you'd want to share, let's start aggregating this. Let's see if we can actually do some good this next legislative session.
That's great. Julie asked if we can get the slides for the presentation. Yes, Julie, we'll post these on the ACA website under webinars. And we're also recording this, so you can go back and reference it too, but the slides will be up on there as well. I don't see any other questions or chat conversation. So with that, Jim, I really thank you for your time and your insights and your collective wisdom on these items. Hopefully we can keep the momentum moving forward and do some real positive things in the coming year. So thank you, Jim.
I love these opportunities, sincerely.
Thank you very much. And for everybody on the call, thank you. And we will talk to you soon. Bye.
Take care.